watch, I think.
Just wanted to, Sammy's question on angling with kids. Sammy, it's really interesting because when I played for Father Bauer, he had a drill favorite. And his drill favorite was one-on-one angling. This is with the national men's team. And it was literally a forward carrying the puck around behind the net and trying to get the length of the ice against one checker. And all he emphasized was keeping the puck on the outside, forcing him to the wall. And he started from different positions, but that's basically all he did. So I don't know if anybody else has done anything special that's worked for them on angling.
Can you guys see my screen?
Yeah.
Yep.
Cool. So here's a drill that I do on following up with Wally's. So I actually did start with that when I first thought about angling and how do I teach it well. Moved to another thing, and this is kind of where I am currently. So basically, we've got this player right here on the blue line with pucks, person on the other side on the dot/blue line. Only thing you tell them is you can't skate backwards. And this person's going to then go down and shoot on the far side. So I'll let it play out. And this is where I've settled on teaching angling from both defense and offensive perspective.
And you know, Greg, I'm looking at that. We used to do a drill with the national team girls, Sammy, you might remember way back that, you know, if you stop it right now, so there, if you know, you could morph this, Sammy, to sort of get the same idea across to defensemen once they've learned this kind of skill, because angling is angling, doesn't matter where you are. But if you push the puck carrier line back to the hash marks or somewhere inside the blue line and started the D basically just inside the blue line on the dot where they normally would be, and just do the same drill, but tell the D their first 2 or 3 steps or strides backwards need to be to the middle of the rink to close the gap. And then same thing, like you're not allowed to skate backwards once you reach the red line. So they sort of basically take the middle of the ice, you know, as the forward starts coming up the boards, and then they'd have to pivot the forward somewhere before the red line and then start angling in a forward skating motion. You could just do this exact same formation, and that would get the idea through to. Do you understand what you guys have that picture?
Yeah, I got that. Thank you, Tim.
We used to do something similar, but with the national team, just trying to get the girls to understand, like when you're in that offensive blue line, when the play starts coming at you, you don't back up right away. You really go sideways right away. You should go along the blue line for 1 or 2 strides and then start working yourself backwards, you know, to start squeezing that forward. And then if you do a good job, then you can turn and just angle them like in the surf mode kind of thing. The other thing you could do is if you're the left or the right D and the play's coming up your side and you start moving to the middle, if your partner's in a good situation, you could literally just switch and let your partner come across. That's a situational thing if there's nobody on the weak side. It's like a 1-on-2 kind of situation. Anyway.
Yeah, another thing that I love to do just to get comfortability on the outside edge, because I find that's just always the weakest spot and kind of like the bottleneck with a lot of players, particularly at the lower levels where the skill's still being developed, is just between every drill we go, you know, 1 lap, but instead of doing a normal lap, you have to do crossovers on the straightaway the entire time. So you're constantly on your outside edge, and just working that separation of upper and lower and being able to have that comfortability coming on an arc rather than doing straight lines.
Yeah, it's in the end, it's all about taking away time and space for the puck carrier instead of backing up and letting them look around and try to figure out what he's going to do. You put them under pressure as soon as you're safe and comfortable doing so. Just basically makes them make up their mind, and that's the essence of good defending: is take away time and space from the offense. In a well, you use the word safe or contained manner. Like I said, I think a lot of NHL teams that go to the extreme, and the Flames might be one of the more guilty ones, that where they overpressure and get caught and get beaten one-on-one.
So
Well,
Sammy, does that answer or help
That
guys
does,
where
yeah,
we need to
thank
be?
you. Thank you
You're
so much.
muted, Molly,
I see it
and-
and being a goalie, you see it, and Tim, you referenced drills that we all did. I don't think I appreciated how you take away time and space and maintain that gap going sort of backwards to forwards until I became a rec hockey player myself and was like, oh, this is much, much harder than my players made it look. And so I was having a tough time reverse engineering it as to how to create that at the younger levels. So, I mean, while I see the Toronto Six do it, they make it look easy. Most of my teaching is with either U9s or adult women that are brand new to the sport. So sometimes reverse engineering things that I can't do that well has been tough. So this is great, and some good little tidbits. Who
Sammy
knows?
Joe,
Maybe my rec hockey, I'm just going to be like a wicked defenseman now.
I think what you're describing, Sammy, is the coaching dilemma. We're talking at a level of historical evolution where you only skated forwards, had to set your gap and transition skating backwards. And that's sort of, to me, that's why transition skating is still important, although not as important, because I think a better advanced tactic is that of surfing or angling. And I really worry, and I've questioned a number of professional coaches about ignoring the ability to transition skate, which just means control of your skating forwards to backwards, controlling your approach, and as Dave King called it, a one-on-one low zone coverage, keep your toe cap square. So the inside edge mastery is totally essential in one-on-one defensive play because your skating is controlled. It's reactive relative to what's happening to the play, the team with the puck, and you have to adapt your approach, controlling the space, steering them to space you want them to go. So when you're teaching, the transition skating is important, but I think now at a minor level, and I'm talking Tom's U13 team, he surfed really effectively, and they did transition skating backwards as well in both. Okay, hope that helps, Sam, with the kids. But Don Cherry brought his dog on the ice with the Boston Bruins.
No, Roger Nielsen. Roger Nielsen.
Roger Nielsen?
Yeah, with the
teach
Peterborough
angling.
Petes.
Yeah.
Okay. Put the player behind the net, and the dog showed them how to contain and angle. Yeah, that was Roger. There definitely needs to be, I think, a level of skating proficiency. I'm not sure, Greg, you could weigh in too, but at what level you might want to start teaching sort of the surfing and angling to young kids, but certainly Tom's group or AAA Pee Wee groups could probably handle it. But yeah, it's and I think part of what I was saying, Wally, is I totally agree with Dave's old stance on it, but a lot of the NHL teams are getting more proactive with their defending, not reactive, in pressuring the puck. And that's where lots of them do get caught, but that's the way they're going these days.
Okay. Listen, Hal, you had posted shoulder on shoulder. That's playing the rush, correct?
Well, no, it's about defending. It's about how to position the puck against the puck carrier while you're angling them. So we'd take a skater and have him go around the net, and then the defending skater out in front of the net, and now you've got to come around. But if you come too quick, if you get ahead of the puck carrier's shoulder, they're going to cut inside on you. So it's more about a positioning type of play. And then as we've talked, forcing the puck carrier out to the wall, where then you can then move into whether it's female or male, you can move into stick on stick or play through the hands to try to regain possession of the puck. The difficulty at the younger ages is skating ability, matching skating abilities. Because if the kid with the puck's really fast and the other one can't skate fast on that angle, the puck carrier just blows right by him. There's little. I always ask kids if they've taken geometry yet, depending on what age they are. But the big circle is a longer journey than a small circle, and so most of them don't get it till they're in high school. But we start with the younger kids trying to do that kind of a thing because it isolates. What we're showing, Greg, that was a great thing you showed, Greg. I like that. But if that defender doesn't skate well or on par with the forward, that's not going to work too good. The same concept is fine though, right? Don't overskate it. And I'm going to go watch some the prospects in the North American Hockey League tomorrow morning and on Saturday, and I'll see what I see that relates to all of this.
Hal, I found the same thing trying to defend like Glenn Anderson or something, that I really couldn't keep up with him. I wasn't very effective at angling him.
It's all about skating, eh?
Yeah, it's all relative. You're muted there, Wally.
I always advocated at the national women's level, the player playing the puck carrier in the D zone had to finish the check or make contact before the hash marks, take off hash marks. And that was just the idea of, if you did get in the seam, they were going to walk it. And then it got to be a debate of how to cover that player coming up the wall. So, there's so many different coaching tactics and techniques. Angling, it should be the easiest one to teach. At Hockey Alberta clinics, they have actually the sheepdog one, where the sheep are steered by the dog to go through the gate they want them to go through. So, Dominic, I don't know if you joined long enough, but initially I wanted to talk more about D-zone cover and the advanced offensive tactics that were being exploited below the goal line that Greg brought up, because quite simply, I don't believe NHL defensemen can control their skating to that degree. They don't master their inside edges. They don't keep the toe cap square. They get beat one-on-one along the boards. They go out too far and get extended, get outnumbered. And with the Flames especially, that was evident in a lot of highlight reel goals that I watched this year. So, Dominic, any comments on it? Now we've gone from sort of angling in the neutral zone and surfing and one defenseman playing rush backwards. But I just wanted to refer to D-zone skating specifically, whether it's man-on-man or zone. It's going to be one or the other in different situations. I agree with Greg. It's got to be what it should be in the situation you're in. And you have to intuitively, as a unit of 5, work off each other to avoid giving anybody a spatial advantage. So, Don, anything you can add to the angling with your girls right up to your work with the NHL teams?
Yeah, well, I mean, I can speak to, like Bob Hartley. That was, I mean, he had certain things that he worked on, and that was one of them. Obviously, stick position was huge, and he was the master of being able to stop a clip a half second before, saying if your stick was here, you'd be eliminated from the middle. And you know, he did some pretty elementary and basic drills, even in pregame skate, and I like in the NHL team. Like he'd do one where again it was the repetition, and it wasn't necessarily, you know, the practice of it, but he would have all the players stand at the red line and then dump a puck, you know, towards one end, and the one player would go and they could choose either side, and the second player would angle, and he was, you know, nothing groundbreaking in the way that he wanted, hands through hips and stick on puck and everything else. So, but that was a huge part. And I mean, obviously it led into everybody from, you know, Lance Buma to Johnny Goudreau being able to get in front of people. And that was a big part of his, you know, and his success. And say what you want about anything that he's done, but he's won at every single level. But that was at every single level, whether it was, you know, in Switzerland when he coached us, or whether it was in, you know, with the Flames, or whether it was the American League or Russia, wherever. I'm certain that was a big part of it. So, you know, I'm a big believer in it as well. Obviously, you know, the game's changed in regards to the body contact, and that's been well discussed on this forum as well, as far as getting in front as opposed to, you know, taking yourself out of play and you know, trying to go through somebody. But you know, we do it a lot with the girls. Obviously, I think it's an important piece. I think the body contact piece is a big thing with the girls in regards to, you know, the bump. You know, is there a bounce when you go in with the girls? You know, like there's some that they come in recklessly and it's contact, and there's a you know, a pop and a bounce, and then it ends up being a penalty. So that to me has been a big you know, detail to try to get them to understand. But I mean, yeah, I think it's a huge, I mean, obviously it's a huge part of the game, but just trying to have it, you know, and I saw Greg's drill as far as from, you know, and I love it as far as, you know, coming off from the blue lines. I think, you know, and I can just speak for myself with the girls. Like we've got 14, like U16, like, you know, 13, 14, 15, 16-year-old girls. I feel like I've got to bring it down smaller area a little bit, because when you have a bigger kind of runway, if you will, then I think some of the details get lost in the shuffle, and then the rate of speed is preventative, and having them understand to be able to get, whether it's hips in front and not be a, you know, just those right small details. So, but yeah, and as you said, in regards to the defensive zone coverage, this was always a bone of contention in regards to whether it was, you know, when does it become man on man, or is it man on man? And, you know, I had phone calls from when we were down in the minors, is that we're not man on man, but then, you know, you'd have the D that are involved, and, you know, what's the philosophy? Does the winger stay with them, or does the D not come up past the top of the circles? And there's that switch between the D and the winger. So yeah, it was probably the one thing that was the most debated is, and I, you know, my time there was, you know, what is the best D zone type of system to be able to, you know, to eliminate, you know, what's going on. I mean, you watch, and it's my own personal thing, you watch what Vegas did against Edmonton as regards to, you know, and I know John Stevens was, you know, he's a defensive coach there. I thought it was impressive, right? You've had those guys, and they, you know, Edmonton, you know, Woodcroft was in Bakersfield, and very much the same idea, you know, trying to get the motion of the 5-player motion involved. And, you know, their D didn't, from what I saw, their D didn't come above, you know, whether it was the hash or the top of the circle. And they, you know, they were in zones very much, as opposed to having the, you know, the winger going all the way down to the goal line. So from my perspective, I think that's one of the better ways to deal with it, especially when you have that 5-player motion. But again, just my 2 cents.
Dom, when I talked about the rule with the national women's team, finish the check before the hash mark. That's exactly the dilemma of one-on-one D zone cover. How close are you? When that puck's moved and changes location, who's the new first player on you? And how do they manage to control that defensive side and create no time and space for the puck carrier to execute? Because at the NHL level, they're literally offensive rimming the puck from the top down and from the corner to the far point just to change the location where there is some space to create some offense. So that defensive player number one, whether it's a forward who's at, first in the D zone back, maybe playing the puck carrier, I think you've got to have that pressure. You can't penalty kill with 5, although I think some teams may do that if their difference in ability is really great. Anyway, any other comments, Greg? Because I know you were interested in talking about the interchangeability and the way the game's progressing relative to 5-on-5. And I think defensive switching isn't as common in hockey as it is in basketball. So I'm just not sure how far to take this switching in terms of switching roles in hockey, whether it's the game's too fast to switch.
You're talking
I think maybe
offensively, Wally.
fair for you, Tim.
Sorry, I just say to clarify, you're talking about switching roles offensively.
Oh, I'm talking both, but I'm basically talking switching defensively.
Just wanted to clarify. Go ahead, Greg.
Yeah, I want to back it up maybe a few steps because we kind of touched on it very briefly, but I think it's a rabbit hole that is worth going down, of just the idea of self-organization by players and teams and having the ability to read off each other. Like, this is a big reason I try to very rarely use a whistle in my practices. And I will run, say, like a drill, and then the exact next rep, everyone's got to switch roles. You can't do the same thing twice. So there's got to be a communication between players and organization between players, and trying to become part of the fabric of how we go about developing, and just having players be able to figure it out. Because a lot of times I've found, particularly with house players coming into high school here in Columbus, is that they've never had like the freedom on their own, nor do they really have the confidence of their skills that you get maybe a AAA level or a higher end level, where the real development needs to be on having them becoming better coaches of themselves and being able to operate within a team environment, having that confidence to step up and say something or take a little bit of responsibility. So how do we do that? I think that's where the rabbit hole can start to lead you down into some interesting spots, because that's where I find to be the biggest gap, especially with the players that I see quite often. It's just the lack of self-organization, confidence, assertiveness that you might get with someone who's a little more self-driven, that would find their way automatically kind of self-selecting out towards those higher levels that many times you hear people talking about. So that's number one. And then second piece with the just reading off each other, like, how do we do that? Like, if you take out a whistle, well, now the players have to look at each other. They have to slide in, they got to slide out. Or if you're challenging them to do something different every single time, or a different role every single time, well, now they have to figure it out with their teammates. Okay, well, if I'm doing this, you're doing that. Who's taking the third role or fourth role or whatever it may be? And all the benefits that leads to that. I think that's had more of a positive impact on player development than any system or drill itself. Is just setting up the environment where they've got to self-organize and read off each other consistently. And it's not just, oh, you've got to read to do a switch or this. It's more part of the fabric.
Greg, excellent point. Dom, I want to come back to what you said when you were working in the American League, and the father team said, no, we don't do that. And they don't have that flexibility at the NHL level. They're coaching by telling, and the rule of play which is, to me, that's not the way to go anymore. And if Greg's talking about this with his kids, I'm talking about this with the pros. And if the executive coaching team at each level of that organization isn't on the same page, then you're in trouble. So the idea of player freedom and decision making, I think, is sort of the starting point in terms of knowing what they're doing and possibly even suggesting what could be done better. I think at that level, that's a very big possibility, tapping into their intuition, their knowledge, and their skill sets to do what needs to be done to gain time and space or to take time and space away. That's the way the game's going. I think we're being left in the dust as coaches, I think. Jordan, well,
Yeah, no,
Prince Edward Island. Jordan's in Prince Edward Island, so he's speaking at the Futures Convention out there. So go ahead, Dom. Reply.
yeah, no. I was just gonna I saw it was interesting. I was watching the last Oilers game, and they ended up there was a power play that they got, and I think it was Gulutzin. He runs the power play there, and obviously they're have a record-breaking historical power play. And he came over to, and I can't remember which game it was, but he came over, and he wasn't running the meeting. It was either a timeout or whatever it was. He wasn't running the meeting. He was just basically overseeing, and it was the five guys that were having the conversation as to what they were going to do. Right. To your point, Wally. I mean, obviously these are elite players, and Gully's smart enough to understand and to recognize as to what they're seeing is probably the most important thing. I think it's just as you say, you're trying to guide. I think when you get, and so that's power play. You've got these elite guys that are doing it. I think when you come to when it's defensive zone, coverage or system, and I agree, like the players are the one, and you want to have their input and everything else. And this is, probably doesn't even need to be said, but at the end of the day, if something goes sideways, they're going to be like, well, who's the coach here, right? And then it's the managerial that comes down on it, and that's ultimately what it came down. It came down to a finger pointing thing, right? Because the situation that happened with us, there's a player that got called up, and the player said, they said, well, we're not man on man here. And the player said, well, that's what they do down in Stockton. And so then all of a sudden there's a phone call right down to me and said, hey, like, you guys play man on man? And it was this whole thing. But, again, it's maybe the play, like, obviously, the player not wanted to take responsibility for a read that he made on the ice. And it was easier to say, kind of put blame. But hey, I agree. The game's played better when the players have more, skin in the game, accountability, being able to make those decisions, and the coaches are just guiding. But the reality is that I think, you've got to, as a coach, especially at that level, you've got a real sort of runway as to how you're doing things, and they don't have the runway to be able to, to not have something black and white. And so when the question's being asked, yeah, no, this is the way that we're doing it. So I get it. In an ideal world, in a perfect world, yes, you have this collaborative type of thing going on. But unfortunately, a lot of times coaches that are there don't have the runway to be able to have those types of, Socratic type of conversations and environments. It's very, very much a dictatorship in the way that, hey, I have this short window. They say the expectancy of a coach is 3 years. Well, after year one, if your defensive zone is spotty and everything else, you might not get to see the light of day of year two. So just my 2 cents.
Tim?
Yeah, I think this all gets into the area we've been in time and time and time again. It's part of the art of coaching. There can't be. I don't think it's total freedom for the players, and I don't think you leave it totally up to them to figure it out, because some of them will never figure it out what to do. I think there has to be some guidance and guidelines from the coaches, and some freedom for the players in all situations, offensively and defensively. But if you don't help them through a situation and sort of give them a framework or a starting point defensively, and that can be as simple as, like we talked about, we're going to be basically like the old school defending. We're going to basically be a zone defense kind of team, or we're going to be a man-on-man kind of team defensively, or in like more now, we're going to be zone defense when the puck's below the circle tops and try to swarm and compress space. But whenever the puck gets passed up to the top or carried up to the top, that triggers man-to-man defending. I think you have to have that starting point for your players, and then question them, and don't try to tell them what to do in every situation, but give them some freedom. But you have to give them that kind of organizational, structure, whatever word you want to use, or system. They need a starting point. And I think that's crucial, and that's where the art of coaching kicks in. How do you help them learn the situations and how to handle the situations that they're being confronted with now, with 5 players moving around in the offensive zone? Like, it's tough, and it's almost impossible as a coach to try to tell them what to do in every situation, because there's so many different situations. So that's where the questioning and the freedom for the players to figure it out sort of comes in. But I think you need that basic structure first. Go ahead, Hal.
Yeah, I would agree. I've coached an awful lot of kids, even up through high school, whatever, who really, by the time I get them, they haven't got a clue what they're supposed to do. They just have been playing hockey, and the wings are the worst. And the D get more coaching. I don't think forwards get as much coaching and how to react to different situations. So my theory was you've got to have some structure, some organization, and then you can create off of that once you understand what not only the puck carrier is going to do, but if you're supporting, you've got to have an understanding of what the options are, and then you use your reactive skills. But I've always said it in the youth game, minor hockey game, and down here is puck support is the winger coming up the ice, the next guy's coming and he's 20 feet away in the middle going pass to me, and then the third winger is coming in and says pass it to me, and there's no sort of idea that you go over and support or you move into a position to support your, it's just all about passing it to me, pass it to me type of thing. And they all go in a line right up the ice, and they're so easy to defend against. And so it's a great point. This is the role of really what I call transformational coaching. And if you get a group of kids and you have success with it and they move on to the next coach who doesn't believe in that, it's sort of like, that's not, it's hard to have a long lasting impression on kids. It's the right way to go for sure. But it is a challenge, because I think when I was coaching in the elite league in Minnesota, which were the top 100 players in Minnesota in high school, they had Phil Housley was helping me. It was during one of the strike years. And we asked the kids, how many coaches have you had? They're 17 or 18 years old. Somewhere in the range of 80 to 90 different coaches. And they all have a different point of view. So my challenge was always, I want to be the coach they remember the most, and for the right reasons. And so anyways, that's my thought on all that.
And maybe one just as one example is, in terms of laying down like a sort of a defensive philosophy or structure or system. A lot of people talk about how offensively, one of the most dangerous places to have the puck is, back of the net or below the goal line. So if you flip that, one of your guidelines defensively is we don't want to let the offense get there. And so when you're defending one-on-one, one of my big pet peeves, I see it all the time with the Flames, unfortunately, and lots of teams is, a defenseman or a forward's going to defend somebody sort of below the goal line off the side of the net, and they overplay in a pressure mode, and the offensive player just spins off, gets to the back of the net. Like, for me as a coach, that is a primary. Like, don't let that player get to the back of the net carrying the puck. Now, they're going to get there occasionally passing it there, like Wally was saying, rimming it or whatever, but you don't want to give it to them. And that's where, Wally, that's where sort of some of the contain mode comes in defensively, is you want to, this is a little bit old school defending, but I think it's still applicable. You want to steer them away from the net and up the wall. And then the question becomes, if you can't, because of your distance, eliminate them by the hash marks, okay, then what happens? Because you need help plugging the seam there. And that's where the guidelines help. Like, do we want to keep it away from the back of the net? If we do, then we're going to have situations where people are going up the wall and might have a little bit of time and space. And then what do we do from there? And, for me, it's simple. If they carry it above the circle tops, then because you don't want to give time and space to the offense, whether it's a forward or a D, you stay on that person. You don't want to give them time and space. Like, stay on them. So those are kind of some of the simple rules we use with the Danish girls in particular, but I've always used with my teams. But you give them sort of situational guidelines, and then you got to read and react in the moment, of course.
Tim, I want to make a point exactly on what you said, because it's totally what's missing. The players understand how to handle those situations, but they can't perform because they can't control their skating. Dave King did it in 2 words: toe cap square. You don't overskate. You don't get turned so they can cut back on you. So the inside edge mastery, his teaching point of toe cap square, was almost enough with the national team. But it isn't today. Those players, even at the NHL level, need to work on those inside edges deliberately before a game, because when you play without the puck, that inside edge mastery is controlled skating. It's totally lacking today, because all of the work is crossovers, acceleration, creating time and space, and you still have to work on the other side of the fundamental tactical skating defensive going to handle the one-on-one. So that's my technical point. I did it at an HP1. I would do it with any NHL team that was willing to experiment with it to help them handle their one-on-one. All the things you go and are talking about, I think are being talked about and told. Maybe not clearly enough, but what's missing is those big bodies can't get low enough, break down. Like when you got on punt coverage, you got to break down your running to control your speed, to contain the runner to the inside. That's lacking fundamentally, the controlling of the speed, maintaining your lane. That's a fundamental. To me, it's so fundamental and it's missing. And I'm saying, I go back to Craig. I says, Craig, they can't do that. So we can do all what we want offensively, because we're not doing anything to teach one-on-one defensively in that skill. I'm done. Okay, go ahead, Tim.
I'm not sure that, I think a lot or most or almost all NHL defensemen are capable of doing that. I think it's much a mental skill. Defending, angling, surfing, containing is as much a mental exercise as it is physical at that level, where they're all very good, competent skaters. It's what's going on in their head where there's a lot of breakdowns in my mind. They're not thinking contained, they're thinking pressure, and that leads them to be overly aggressive, get out of position, and be vulnerable defensively. I think it's as much of a mental thing as it is physical. And sorry if I interrupt you, Hal. I didn't know if you wanted to jump in there.
Oh,
Tim, you're totally right. Everything starts with the head, the mind. Your controlled skating starts with the mind. Control your speed, but the physical feeling of doing that requires a different tactile sensitivity to your inside edges. And that's all I'm referring to. It starts with the head, the concept of not going too hard, not over skating. And I'm just saying a little bit of time spent on this to create the feeling of those edges, which you might need to have used differently in a game situation. But you're totally right. It's all about the mind. That's where it starts.
So much of hockey is in the mind, as we all know. The hockey sense is, as important as skating ability in lots of ways.
Sammy, I got a question. Like talking at the NHL level, it's all offense. And they're creating new ways of creating offense. And I think right now that's winning in the NHL. It's selling tickets. But at your level, are the offensive abilities that extreme that they cause that much stress for your defense? Or is it still a fundamental game, more linear?
You mean at the Toronto 6 level, not at my